9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
The era of big government is over.
Well, it sadly looks as though those days might be gone. Our top story tonight is big government's growing interference in the economy. Now, as you can see, there once was a time when both parties agreed that the federal government being more involved would do more harm than good. But now Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is saying we can't go back to work without big government. Listen.
It's time to recommit our government to playing a more active and smarter role in the economy.
Joining me now to discuss this is economist Steve Moore. Steve, good to see you. I'm okay with smarter government. It's the more active part of government that scares me. What about you?
Well, I think that's exactly right. And, we have this inflation problem now, David, that you've been talking about on your shows. And one of the major contributors to this a sudden rise in inflation is clearly the trillions of dollars of unpaid for spending that's in Washington. And there's another $2 to $4 trillion that Biden wants on top of that. But look, inflation is very simple. It's too many dollars chasing too few goods. And when you've got the federal government just massively spending money like it is right now, and by the way, I calculate that if we were to pass this additional $2 trillion spending bill, that government spending at all levels would be very close to 50% of our GDP. Half of our economy would be government for virtually the first time in peacetime in the history of the country.
Steve, we have a problem here, a big problem, and that is that this government, the Biden administration, is gambling on theories that have been untried. In particular, you mentioned monetary policy. I mean, there's this, what is it called? The modern monetary theory, which claims that you can just print as many dollars as you want with no effect. I've covered countries all over the world for several decades now. And whenever a country tries to monetize the debt, spends like crazy, and then tries to just print more money, they always end up with trouble, big trouble. Why does this administration think it would be any different now?
Yeah, it's a story that almost never has a happy ending. And I can't think of an exception to that. So why would we try it? The modern monetary theory idea, has been very popular in the Democratic Party because it gives politicians an incentive, an excuse to spend money that we don't have. And that's what's been going on in spades. And by the way, the Republicans are just about as guilty of this as the Democrats are, David. That politicians just loving spending money. And if it takes debt or it takes taxes or it takes modern monetary theory, we're just printing dollars. But you're right. I mean, just look at countries like Argentina, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Mexico, countries that have tried to continue to deflate, essentially deflate their currency, have run into big problems. And look, if this spending that was being proposed was actually necessary for the national defense or was actually going to have a high payoff, it might actually make some sense. But we're talking about money for windmills and massive amounts of money now that basically Biden wants to, drop $100 bills out of helicopters.
Well, and $200 billion for K through 12, $200 billion for K through 12 education, which has been closed. I mean, stuff like that just doesn't make any sense. But then I was reading over what Janet Yellen was saying in detail. And bottom line is she's talking about fairness all the time, that there's something unfair about our system. You were part of the last administration, so you do have, I don't want you just to talk your book, but the fact is that after the tax cuts of Donald Trump and after the deregulation of Donald Trump, didn't the system become more fair? I mean, weren't the beneficiaries more blue-collar workers than they were the white-collar workers? And didn't we have more minorities with better-paying jobs and more women with better pay? It seemed like getting the government out was more fair than keeping the government in or increasing its role.
Well, two things happened after the Trump deregulation and tax reduction policies. One was that, as you said, that the incomes for lower and middle income people went up actually faster than it did for higher income people, which is really shocking, actually. And the second thing that happened, David, I wish Janet Yellen were watching the show. Maybe she is. The share of taxes paid by the rich actually went up
That's right.
In other words, the top 1% paid a higher share of taxes after those tax cuts.
Right.
By the way,
right.
I was out with your buddy Larry Kudlow yesterday. He went over the last 100 years.
Yeah.
He showed every time, whether it was Coolidge or it was Kennedy or Reagan or Trump, every time we cut tax rates,
that was a brilliant segment. You guys were terrific, but it went from like 39.5%, the top 1% paying total, to over 40% under Donald Trump. So again, we've said this before, but if you want to soak the rich, lower their tax rates because they get more involved and the government gets more money from them. I just want to end, though, with one statement that I'm sure you know, many of our viewers probably don't, from Milton Friedman, the great free market economist, who said if you want to focus on equity, there's a problem. A society that puts equality before freedom will get neither. A society that puts freedom before equality will get a high degree of both. And I think that's been proved time and again. If all your focus is on equity, you end up with no growth and little equity. But if you focus on freedom first, that's better for everybody, right?
Yeah, and I was privileged to know Milton Friedman pretty well at the end of his life. I think you knew him pretty well. And I remember last time I met him prior to when he died, I said, Milton, what's the most important thing we can do to grow the economy? You know what he said, David?
Grow.
Cut government spending.
Right. No, grow. There's no bottom line here. And I once talked to the governor of Texas about why his growth rate was so much higher than the other states. He said, it's not rocket science. You just make it easier for businesses to grow and you'll have growth. It's very simple. I mean, I don't understand why people have to make it complicated and fail doing so. But it seems that that's the path we're on for the moment. Steve, good to see you. Thank you very much.